Here's what Connecticut is saying about Lisa Wexler.
If somebody like you with common sense could run this country, we would have a lot less problems.
Now, back to the Lisa Wexler Show on Southern Connecticut's news and information leader, WICC 600.
I've got to do everything I can to keep people believing in the public trust. And this was, I think, an abuse of the public trust. Maybe it was just a little casual, scratch my back, I scratch yours. Maybe it was worse than that. I don't hire him. I don't fire him. But if I did, he'd be gone.
So that was Governor Lamont yesterday speaking about his thoughts with respect to the Chief State's Attorney, Richard Colangelo. In Connecticut, our Attorney General functions are divided between Mr. Colangelo, who is in charge of criminal prosecutions, and William Tong, who's been on the show, who's in charge of all of the enforcement of so many other laws that result in civil suits. And it is bifurcated in Connecticut. There are two different offices, two different staffs, and two different chiefs. But in Connecticut, the leader of the state's attorney, which is the criminal piece, is not appointed by the governor. It's appointed by a commission. And the commission consists of attorneys and judges, and it is called the Criminal Justice Commission. There are 4 lawyers, 2 judges, and the chief state's attorney. It is codified in the state constitution, and is this commission that has the ultimate say over who will lead the Division of Criminal Justice. I invited Darnell Crossland on. You know his name because he has been the person who, along with, I would say, Frank Recchi of News 12, have really been elevating the cause of the family of Lawrence Smith Fields to national and international prominence. Mr. Crossland has been representing the family, and he has been agitating for answers. The other big story, as it happens today, is another story involving Mr. Crossland, which is the story of who is running the police department in Bridgeport right now, where Rebecca Garcia has come back from a week's away. We don't know exactly what that meant, but it says away, and now she's back. And there are all kinds of cross currents about who is supporting whom to lead the investigation and to lead the police department in Bridgeport. Darnell Crossland joins us right now from the beautiful island of Antigua, where we appreciate you calling in because, Mr. Crossland, clearly you are at the You are really a part of the story of 2 of the major stories today on the Lisa Wexler Show. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And yes, I'm a part of all things Connecticut. And sometimes I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but there's so much to talk about. We're probably going to have a part 2. But fire away.
Fire away. All right. Well, let's start with Mr. Colangelo and that clip that we just heard. First of all, were you surprised that the governor spoke the way he did?
Yes, I have to say I am surprised because typically in Connecticut and what we're seeing in a lot of the cases and a lot of the political landscape, people will hold back their opinions because of political favor, political positioning and posturing. So I'm very proud of Governor Lamont for coming out and saying directly and forthright exactly how he felt. We need more of that. And so I support those feelings. I agree with those feelings. And so I'm very happy and surprised that he came out and said that what he said.
And it should be noted that they are of the same political party, because often when people are not in the same political party, the public will say, well, it's just, expected, and they get cynical about what people really think because they think they're just taking digs at someone of the opposite political party. So it should be noted that they're all Democrats.
That's correct. That's very important. And what the governor said was that we must maintain public trust. And what we don't want is people in positions such as Richie Colangelo's position going after voices that aren't the same voice that he may have or same position that he may have. And again, you can cut me off when you want to, but I have to tell you the history of this guy is exactly reminiscent of what we're seeing today and what's before us. There's so many lawyers that have made complaints against this guy privately, but no one's come forward. And I'm so glad that this is the chicken's coming home to roost, basically. And this is exactly what we need to be talking about. I give you a quick story. Judge Devlin, who's an outstanding judge, we had a murder case going on in Stanford. We've been on this case for a very, very long time. And Richard Colangelo found himself in the hallway talking to my client's parents saying, I'm not sure why you're hiring a lawyer. I'm going to give you a good deal anyway. Judge Devlin, the first time I ever heard him curse, called us in chambers and said to him, what the F are you doing? That's unethical. You can't be talking to somebody's clients. What are you thinking? And he told me, Darnell, and this is going back over 10 years now, if you want to, let me know, and we can elevate this. And he says, spend the weekend thinking about it and let me know. Another case, Richard Colangelo had a fist fight with Lindy Urso, who's a lawyer in Stanford, pushed him across the table because he's a bully. And then Lindy socked him one in the mouth and bloodied up the place. Now, these are two white boys. No one got arrested. Now, you fast forward this into where I am. Richard Colangelo is telling Travis Sims, a state representative, that Darnell has a big mouth and we need to get rid of him. What does he do? He comes up with some charge of witness tampering and bribery against me, which I would never do, and the facts don't even support. But I can't tell you how much pressure that puts on an individual to be charged with a crime, and they have a law practice to run. They have family to take care of, and there's thousands of black kids in this state that fall victim to prosecutorial misconduct, such as that Richie subjected me to, and they just take the deal because they have nobody to fight. I'm a lawyer, and I know lawyers, and I have knowledge, and still I couldn't sleep all those nights. And this was unfair, and this prosecution or this investigation against Colangelo is vindication for me, and I'm thankful that we're seeing who he really is.
So we're chatting with Darnell Crossland. So let me ask you something, Mr. Crossland. With respect to your own witness tampering case, what's the status of that case? I know it was removed to New Haven, but after that, I really don't know what happened.
Yeah. So the case, I had a lawyer, had Wayne Keeney, and again highlights how close people are to each other. So Wayne Keeney and Richard Colangelo are very close. They try to get me to plead to a felony, et cetera. I fired him. I moved forward with the case of my own, and now the case has been adjourned in contemplation of dismissal. So the judge is contemplating dismissing this case, and now with all that's happening with Richie and his true colors, I'm going to be motioning for the court to undo this arrest and reinstate the status quo because it was a legal arrest in the beginning.
Let me ask you something, Mr. Crossland. It begs the question, if everything you're saying is true with fistfights and Judge Devlin, how did Mr. Colangelo get the position to begin with if he had this history in Stanford?
And that goes back to what I'm saying. It's such an incestuous space that we live in that you can have a guy like Attorney Wayne Keeney who is close with Malloy and he's close with Andrew McDonald, and everyone knows each other and everyone lobbies for each other. I practice in New York as well, and so New York the judges have to be elected, and so even in that process they're still lobbying. But in Connecticut, to become a judge, you have to find a guardian angel, I think they call it, someone who could help the mayor, the governor, find out who you are. So everyone is always lobbying and moving and positioning. So that's how he got in his position. He lobbied and moved. I personally supported Kevin Lawler, and I was personally embarrassed that when Kevin Lawler lost the race against Richie, when it came for confirmation hearings, I had to watch this grown man almost cry and beg for his job. They embarrassed him to me. Kevin Lawler is tough. We don't always get along. We've had investigations that we're on the opposite side, but I find him to be much more ethical than Richie Colangelo. But on those confirmation hearings, I think it was Burke, Justice McDonald, and the rest of them put some real hard questions to Kevin, saying that during the campaign, you said some things that might have been polarizing against Richie. If we let you back in, or if we confirm you, can you promise us that you won't undermine Richie? And he had to sit there and put his head down and almost beg for his job and promise that he won't undermine Richie. That's not right. If he ran a strong campaign and he lost, he shouldn't have to lose his job now because Richie won, and he shouldn't have to kiss the ring. And so that's what we find, things like that. And while we're on that, right now in Stanford, there's two prosecutors that I won't name, but one of them is a female, and her husband has now been hired by Richie out of Mark Sherman's office to be a prosecutor. Now we have a husband and wife in Stanford. Now, if you don't get along with one of them, you don't get along with both of them. And that's the type of environment that we don't need in Connecticut. I'm not saying this gentleman shouldn't get a job as a prosecutor, but put him someplace else. Why would Richie hire a husband and wife in the same little tiny office? That's nepotism, again, all over. And it needs to stop. And I'm speaking about it because they're not going to bully me. I'm not going to be afraid of them. And if no one else will stand up and speak truth to power, I'm going to do it. And so they should separate the husband and wife in the same office. That's nepotism. It's the same thing why he's in trouble now, and he's still doing it.
We're chatting with Darnell Crossland. You know, I'm listening to what you're saying about a husband and wife. I didn't know this, but this is not my area, so this is all news to me. About a husband and wife being married to each other as prosecutors, and I'm thinking that Jeff Zucker just got fired from CNN because of pressure from AT&T because of a consensual affair. Could you imagine if he'd been married to the person in his same office? That's wow. Interesting.
It doesn't make for good office. And you're a counsel. You've been practicing for a long time. Can you imagine that you come into conference a case in the morning and you're going to be conferencing with Mr. and Mrs. Smith? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. And you know what? Since I'm not a punk, I don't know the gentleman's name, but I know the wife is Elizabeth Moran, Morian, and her husband, I forget his name. But, you know, it's not good. It's not good to come in the morning and have a husband and wife. Suppose they had a child of age. Can we put the child in there too? So now it's husband, wife, and child? It's like a mom and pop shop. This is not good for the world to see this.
Why don't you educate us a little bit? We're chatting with Darnell Crossland. What is the power of the state's attorney? So you mentioned that they have the power. Are they the exclusive appointer of prosecutors in the state?
The state's attorney can hire, as you've been reading in these articles, and I think the gentleman, I can't even pronounce his last name, but whose daughter Richie hired, you could pronounce it for me. But as he said, Richie's in charge for hiring the prosecutors. So the commission is over him, but he's totally in charge of who he hires. And I've seen him move prosecutors up and down throughout the jurisdiction. But what we need to remember is that prosecution, ethically, they have a duty to seek justice and not convictions. And when they fail to comply with that ethical obligation, then we have a problem. And I think everything about this man, he should say to himself that Connecticut deserves better, that he's brought some shame on this office, and he should step down himself. And he's not going to do it because that's not how he's built. He wants to win at all costs. But he needs to step down because, as the governor stated, it looks wrong. It looks bad. And if the government or the people of the state don't have confidence in the person who's in charge of putting you to jail, they have so much power with prosecutors. And if there's anything that brings that power into question, then he has to step down because people are going to be asking for convictions to be overturned. We're going to be in a total mess. So I think that the Attorney General, we're all so close. I think the Attorney General was a lawyer in Stanford. Andrew McDonald was a lawyer in Stanford. Maybe the same firm.
Yeah, I don't know the same firm, but they all were from Stanford. You're right about that. Absolutely.
Yeah, yep. I think it was Cummins and Lockwood. We're all from the same cloth. And, again, I like Andrew. Andrew and I are friends. But we're so close that if we don't start to examine these relationships, then we're going to not be in a good place as a jurist, as we move forward. And we need better.
We're chatting with Darnell Crossland. Mr. Colangelo was reappointed to a full 5-year term in June of last year. He previously served as Stanford State's attorney. He also was the attorney in charge during the disappearance and death of Jennifer Dulos. That's how he got a lot of press. There was tremendous amount of press for that particular case. But it should be said that Twardes, and Mr. Twardy is the person who was in charge of the 500-page report that he issued. It said that he found no direct evidence of collusion between Colangelo and Costa Diamantis over the hiring of his daughter Anastasia, but, quote, questioned the accounts of all three as to how the hiring process unfolded and said that both Colangelo, Costa, and Anastasia Diamantis lack credibility in the statements they provided to investigators, which for me, Mr. Crossland, was an extraordinary statement and really it just undermines everything about the man's integrity if an investigator finds that he lacked credibility. Basically, it's a nice way of saying you didn't tell the truth.
Absolutely. And if that finding says that he didn't tell the truth, how can we trust him to be in charge of doing justice for the entire state? But let's look at the case more specifically. If Attorney Colangelo sends an email or a position vacancy to the father of this young lady who we end up hiring, but he didn't post it publicly, that's a violation. All the government jobs are supposed to be posted, and many people are supposed to be able to interview for these jobs. If he sends it directly to them, to this man, and then his daughter sends a resume in, that's an issue. And then later on, there's an email where he says, I better get these people in my office raises so that way they can be on my side when it's time for reappointment. Now, if you study the world, in China specifically, they have a word for this, and I forget the word, but when corruption is in government in China, they don't hire the person who they are colluding with. They always hire the children of those people. And so this is nothing new under the sun what Colangelo is doing here. So he didn't make this up, but it's the same corruption either way. You hire the child and you curry favor with the person, with the parent. And that's exactly what's happening here. So where there's smoke, there's fire. And so all Twardey is saying, and I spoke to him at length, very nice guy, ethical guy, honest guy. He's saying that we saw a lot of smoke in that building, but we just couldn't find the source of the fire. And perhaps we have to take him on his word at that. But the rest of us who have power, the commission needs to act. Now, I know Justice McDonald has sent it over to the AG's office for a finding, but I think Justice McDonald has enough power to say enough is enough, and I'm gonna go ahead and can this guy. That's the only way we're going to have justice in the state is if this guy is removed.
Well, the newest is that they are going to have some kind of a emergency meeting. Yesterday, they were all asked about it, and it looks like they are going to have some kind of a meeting as quickly as possible, and we're going to see what happens. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. There is never in the history since the state's attorney's office was established in the 1970s, they've never once removed anybody. This would be the first time that they've removed anybody in the middle of their term of office. So we'll see.
That's true, and I've been looking at the history, and I don't know if we had a guy as bad as Colangelo in modern times. And I think that we need to not just say we've never done it before, so let's not do it. But there's good people on the commission. Melanie Cradle's on the commission. There's another lawyer in the commission. I'm forgetting his name, but he's an African-American male who fought to get his license, I think, after being incarcerated. And so we have voices on the commission that have to speak up. And I'm counting on this commission to speak up, because we can't, if we just walk away from this, then we're not doing Connecticut any justice. And it connects directly to the Lawrence Smith Fields case. Look what's happening in Bridgeport. There's no one who's taking leadership right now. That's why these cops are doing whatever they want, and they have no accountability. There's no one above them. The acting chief, Garcia, just came off a vacation, I'm told, who may be either being suspended or resigned. The two police involved in these African-American women's family deaths. Lawrence Smith Fields was Cronin. He's on suspension. Detective Lanos was in charge of the Brenda Lee Rawls case. He's on suspension. And their supervisor has retired. So can you imagine a city where there's no oversight? And while we're talking about this, I haven't reached out to the governor because there's so much other stuff going on. But the governor should definitely look into Bridgeport and say that this is the largest city in the state of Connecticut. I'm the governor, and that's embarrassing my state. Let's see what's happening there. So I'm glad that the governor stepped up and made some strong statements against Attorney Colangelo and public trust. And we're asking the governor to reach out to my office as well and to see if we can work on what's happening in Bridgeport. I'm a Republican now. At the time, I was a Democrat. And Governor Lamont was running, and I walked him over to my congregation, and I introduced him to all of my people, and we talked, and he wiggled my bow tie and said he loved it, and here we are, so that was a little interaction we had, and now we haven't really spoke much since then, but I love Connecticut. I think we can do much better, and I never sleep. I ran for probate judge. I ran for city council. I ran for mayor. I'm always active because I want better. And then Richie doesn't like people like me, and I'm not afraid of him. People will say, hey, you know what? You've been arrested. You should be quiet. But Martin Luther King had to deal with the same thing with J. Edgar Hoover and so forth and so on. And so I realized in this Black History Month that we're in right now that I must speak up for the truth and it doesn't matter if Richie and his goons try to come after me because I have Lisa Wexler on my side.
Darnell Crossland, thanks for joining us on the show today. Thanks for taking time out of your, I hope you're on a vacation in Antigua. It sounds idyllic right now as we're looking at an ice storm here in Connecticut. But thanks for joining
I'm doing interviews every single day, but okay. I love Connecticut. And Lisa, thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. You'll be on again, I'm sure. Thank you very much for being on with us today. We'll be right back with more of the Lisa Wexler Show. Stay tuned.